All right, well, I was waiting for this one. This one, I believe, is the final video Linux challenge from the popular YouTuber LTT Linus Tech Tips. It's called Gaming on Linux is Not Ready. Yeah, I would kind of have to agree, but is it a failure? I don't know. Let's take a look at this together as a Windows user and Linux user. I use Windows maybe 20% of the time, so I've been quite happy with Linux so far. That being said, I don't game that much. So I'll try to be fair about this in my reaction, but let's take a look and see what he has to say.
There are a plethora of reasons to transition your daily driver gaming rig over to Linux.
You could be sticking it to the man.
Or wanting to support the open source community.
Maybe you daily drive Linux for work already.
And all your games are natively supported anyway.
Or maybe you just want a new and challenging hobby.
But if what you want is a simple, painless gaming experience, then let this be a cautionary tale. One of trials, tribulations, and of course, sponsors. For most of our 1 month challenge, Luke and I avoided specifically seeking out titles that would either validate the Linux gaming experience or intentionally make it look bad. We just focused on playing the games that we would normally want to play.
Or at least we tried to, because not all the games that we wanted to play actually worked. The very first day I installed Linux, I also tried to play the Battlefield 2042 beta. The previous day, still on Windows, I owned some noobs with my buddy Joe, and we wanted to play again the next night. But that wasn't going to happen due to this challenge. It was reassuring, I guess, that even more advanced Linux users were also unable to play, but that didn't actually remedy the fact that I couldn't play games with my friends.
It's funny because I assumed that this challenge would be more painful for me than it would be for Luke. I mean, after all, he has years of Linux experience while I came in with basically none. But here's the thing. I game mostly by myself as a way to relax or to hang out with my kids, and I am extremely flexible about what game I'll play. If something doesn't work, screw it, I'll just play something else. Luke, on the other hand, whose social circle is deeply immersed in gaming culture, has so much more on the line if he can't solve a problem.
Yeah, like I literally had a friend ask, "Hey dude, when are you gonna be back?" Obviously, I had never actually left, but I was a lot more difficult to include as a lot of competitive games that have anti-cheat just don't work. Or it took me so long to get a lot of games to a satisfactory level that by the time
All right, so it seems like the failure or difficulty was more surprising for Luke to achieve it in Linux because apparently he has a lot more experience in gaming, for what I hear so far, I think. But let's continue.
I was ready, everyone else was just done gaming for the night. And as a lot of my friends like to just try random games out for fun, this actually happened a lot.
Our goal is not to spread FUD about the state of Linux gaming though, so it's time to get specific about some of our less good experiences. First up is Steam, or rather, not Steam. Valve's goal of reaching 100% compatibility with the entire Steam game library is admirable. Actually, incredible. As noted by this here Reddit post, the Steam game library is chock full of amazing gaming experiences from AAA studios and indie developers alike. But it's also not the silver bullet that it would have been 10 or even 5 years ago when nearly every game worth playing was available on Steam.
Half of Twitch's top 20 games, at least at the time of filming this, are not on Steam. And I know, being a popular game to stream doesn't necessarily mean it's popular with random gamers out there, but these are all very big name games. And being on Steam isn't an automatic win either. Look at Apex Legends and New World. Both massive games, both listed as borked on ProtonDB.
Native Linux games are obviously going to be your best bet. Want to try one of my personal favorites, Crosscode? Click install, click play, and as simple as that. I mean, I was amazed at how painlessly my Xbox One controller worked.
Okay, that game looks like it's from 1980 something. Okay, it works in Linux. Sorry, yeah.
Though I should note that I stuck with a wired connection rather than trying to tackle getting the unofficial XOW driver working. Valheim, meanwhile, ran amazingly and immediately, demonstrating how even smaller developers can make it work if they've got the will.
In addition to that, while not necessarily native, I played Legion TD2, Towerfall Ascension, Faster Than Light, Slay the Spire, Path of Exile, and Rust, and they all worked perfectly with zero actual effort. And interestingly enough, Dota 2 and CSGO both had completely game-breaking problems that weren't isolated to my system during the challenge. They seem to be solved now, but it goes to show that just like with Windows, because a piece of software was made for it, doesn't mean it's actually going to be perfect.
I didn't have any issues running CSGO, even got me some kills, boys, but I did notice significantly more stutters than I'm used to seeing on this class of hardware. That could be an NVIDIA driver issue, or it could be something else entirely, but for me, it worked well enough that I didn't feel like digging any further into that rabbit hole.
It sounds like Linus and his friend are really trying to make this work as less painful in Linux. At least that's the impression I get, because they're both technology geeks, freaks, and they both love to game, but they want to do it with the least amount of stress as possible, as would a Windows gamer.
Next tier is Windows native games that Valve officially lists as Linux capable via Steam Play. But before we go any further, I just want to say massive respect to the incredible teams who have worked tirelessly to make running Windows games on Linux possible. Valve's Proton compatibility layer is amazing. It's forked from Wine, which has been multiple decades in the making, with about half of its source code written by volunteers. That's freaking wild. And of course, honorable mentions all around for the dedicated communities that maintain tools like Lutris, which automates hacky workarounds for newbies, and ProtonDB, which serves as both a troubleshooting resource and a reference for which games work, so you won't have to waste your money on a bad experience. With all of that said, in spite of all of that work, we're honestly just not there yet. And we're mere months from the launch of the Steam Deck, when 100% compatibility is supposedly coming, which, as of writing this, just got pushed back by 2 months to February.
Also, Doom Eternal reported great performance on my system, over 200 frames per second using...
All right, so it sounds like gaming on Linux is not ready, but it sounds like so far, I'm about, into this 6 minutes in, it sounds like it's not a failure.
Natively supporting Linux is seen by some developers as a somewhat brutal experience. Ben Gaulis has a rather enlightening thread about this on Twitter. He goes on to explain that while Linux gamers were a very vocal part of their pre-launch community, they accounted for less than 0.1% of sales. Yet they generated more than 20% of auto-reported crashes and support tickets. He also stated that near the end of his time there, nearly 100% of tickets were still Linux related, despite Linux receiving the majority of the engineering effort, meaning the company likely spent hundreds of thousands of dollars supporting a community that made them a few hundred in sales revenue.
All right, so there seems to be an imbalance between the amount of resources spent to create any specific game and the amount of money resources coming in. If this is correct, this is bad, really bad, but let's continue.
And as much as everyone already knows it, it bears repeating. The fragmentation problem continues to be desktop Linux's greatest obstacle to widespread adoption. Take It Takes Two, for example. This is a gold-rated Windows...
Okay, I was wondering if he would talk about fragmentation. This is something that Linus Torvalds has talked about in the past. Linus, considered the father of Linux, or the father of modern-day Linux. And Linux celebrates birthday 30 years, actually last year. And in an interview back in 2019, he was very disappointed about the fragmentation of Linux, and that we still don't have a some kind of a standard, global standard for Linux besides Chromebooks. He likes Chromebooks from what I heard, and so do I, but that's not enough. So Linus talking about fragmentation is probably the number one issue, that we don't have some kind of a more Windows-friendly gaming desktop experience, from what I understand.
Windows native Origin game that I got running effortlessly, though I did buy it through Steam and I did launch it through Steam. At least it was effortless until I wanted to have 2 controllers running at the same time. Kind of a requirement for this particular game if I want to play it with the wife. That sent me on a quest to ProtonDB to see if anyone else had the same problem. And no, not really. Everyone else's problems are basically random. So, guess we're not playing that game for now. One of my other favorite games, Supreme Commander Forged Alliance, was as simple to run as clicking install and enabling a couple of launch flags. Awesome! But if you want to play multiplayer, whoo boy! Here's the story. When gas-powered games went under, a small community arranged to preserve multiplayer support for the game by building their own launcher. It is an amazing example of the way that the PC gaming community can come together to preserve experiences that would otherwise be completely lost due to corporate buttholery. Unfortunately, every guide I could find...
Did he just say corporate buttholery? That's, I got my pen. That's one for Linus. Very good.
Not applicable to my particular distro. I don't blame the devs. Really, nothing but love for you guys. But Linux gamers, and more broadly, the Linux community, needs to understand that until the burden of supporting Linux is reduced significantly, this is always going to be a problem. But the bottom line is that none of that matters. What matters is that we like it, and we wanted to play it, but instead of doing that, we played Terminal Command Simulator. And honestly, I've gone through enough of that over the last month that it has sucked a lot of the enjoyment out of using my computer. I have a pretty busy life, and when I manage to salvage an hour to relax and play video games, that is what I want to.
Okay. I've talked about this before, of him having a busy life, and many people having busy lives, and extra busy now with what's going on in the world. Yeah, I think Windows users and really, gamers in general, they want gaming to be a pleasurable experience right off the bat, not solving puzzles or trying to find out which graphics drivers might work or going in the terminal to do something. That takes away the enjoyment of playing a game. And honestly, if Windows had the same problems, gaming would not be as popular in Windows. But Linus makes a good point, and I've talked about this countless times in the past. Your time is valuable, just like anybody else's time. And gaming is all about having fun, and anything that takes away from that experience, well, it destroys the mood.
And it's really opened my eyes to why so many people choose to play on console instead of on PC. Computer-savvy user feels about updating a driver or fixing a firewall setting every time they just want to play a bloody game.
To be clear, I would never say that just because some old game doesn't run, it means that Linux sucks. In fact, I've permanently switched my laptop over to Linux because there are a lot of things it just does really well.
Okay. So this is completely fair. What they're saying here is gaming on Linux is not ready, but it's not a failure. And I can vouch for that. All you Windows users who maybe tried Linux in the past and didn't work out for you, don't give up on it yet. I have Linux installed on this Dell, on a Lenovo, that's off camera, and on a Gateway. And they work fine. Now, I don't do a lot of gaming in Linux. I think my favorite game in Linux is Super Tux Kart. That being said, what's his name? Luke makes a good point. Don't give up on it. Linux has potential.
Even for someone more on the noob side of things like me. What it does mean is that gaming on Linux can kind of suck.
It's not that I don't enjoy it. Man, the rush when Anno 1800 launched after spending a bunch of time fighting with it. It was phenomenal. I felt like the king. But then the next 45 minutes of, okay, why isn't multiplayer connecting, completely destroyed that vibe. Is it because Luke installed the game through the script on the Lutris page, and then I Lutrist Ubisoft Connect and installed the game through that, resulting in a version mismatch? Is it because of some kind of Manjaro firewall nonsense? The answer ended up being that multiplayer used to work, which helped Anno 1800 get a gold rating on ProtonDB, but now it does not.
Genshin Impact, kind of a huge game right now, no Linux compatibility. And while I did manage to find a honestly really great Russian guide from Penguin Gang that I could probably follow, it illustrates a point that I haven't really talked about much yet. Being on Linux can take a lot of the spontaneity out of gaming. You can't just be like, oh cool, that game looks neat, and expect to be playing it in just a few minutes. I also hope you're not necessarily a fan of playing games right on launch. Forza Horizon 5, for example. Amazing, straight up fantastic that people got it working within just 5 days of launch. But that also means that it wasn't working for 5 days after the launch. And if all your friends were playing, they now have sick cars and you're stuck trudging through the swamps for a barn find.
To be clear, I don't want this to take away from some of the great experiences that I've had gaming on Linux in the last month. Overall, I'm really happy I did the challenge. I learned a lot, and it gave me a lot of hope for the future, and I will absolutely be trying to stick with Linux when the Steam Deck shows up sometime next year. But, to summarize the question that we set out to answer, is this the year of the Linux desktop? For gamers, the answer is no. I'm sorry. And the more niche your use case gets...
Linus, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, we do have a year of the Linux desktop, or whatever you want to call it. It actually started a couple years ago. They're called Chromebooks. And higher-end Chromebooks can do gaming really good. Now, Chromebooks are not considered for gamers per se, but they can do gaming. They work because they are a Linux standard, hence the potential power of Linux. That's why I say don't give up on Linux. Are Chromebooks enough for Linux? No, of course not, but they show the potential. All right, there's about 2 minutes left on this. Let's see what Linus has to say.
You know, maybe you're super into modding or the racing or flight sim scenes, or maybe you're a big VR lover. The more resounding that no gets.
And if I'm being honest, I'm in the same camp. But something has given me a lot of hope, and that's how much positivity we've seen from the Linux community in spite of our concerns. Because even if I'm not ready to convert my gaming rig just yet, it gives me hope that one day the meme will end and the year of the Linux desktop will come. I'm as anti-monopoly as anyone, and I'd hate to see the status quo maintained forever.
I know what I don't hate is our sponsor.
All right, so yeah, the so-called year of the Linux whatever is here. It's called a Chromebook. I know many of you won't like it. I completely get it. I'm not too crazy about that either, but those are the facts, so deal with it. Linux has potential. That being said, if you are a Windows user, don't let this somewhat, can't say it's a failure for these guys. It's more of a disappointment. I think they're trying to be as fair as they can, and I think they were. So yeah, some gaming for me in Linux is fine, but I'm not a gamer like these guys. And I don't game that much in Windows either, although I've never had an issue that I recall gaming in Windows. So take it for what it's worth, but I think these guys did a terrific job, both Linus and I think it's Luke. I think this is real life, and this is what a Windows user can experience if you are going full steam ahead, per se, without any advice from a mentor, as it were. So yeah, give it a shot. You know, if you have a spare PC computer, download a beginner-friendly Linux-based system such as Linux Mint, Zorins, Ubuntu Mate. Give it a shot. Who knows? You might learn something. So have fun. That's the main thing. Have fun and don't take this too seriously. For me, I'm done. And I'm going to watch the Dallas Cowboy game. So go Cowboys. Cheers.